Okay, welcome everybody. This is the monthly drone responders webinar with usually the FAA's Mike O'Shea, but Mike O'Shea is on travel on vacation, so we wish him the best. I think he's in Croatia, so he's looking forward to enjoying a beautiful place. In the meantime, I'd like to start off by saying first, I'd like to mention prayers to everyone out there that have been suffering from the tragedy of Hurricane Helene. And for those who are going to be suffering from Hurricane Milton, who is now shortly coming ashore in Florida. With that, I'd like to say, along with that, that from, I know, Hurricane Helene, there's a lot of things we are learning and are going to learn from this situation as far as drones are concerned. So it'll be interesting to capture some of these best practices, lessons learned, some scary stories, but lots of things to go forward. So now I'm pleased to welcome, in place of Mike O'Shea, John Meehan, and we're joined by Steve Pansky, both who have been very much partners with public safety and supporting us along the way. So John, take it away.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I like to think of myself as the better looking of the three of us, and certainly the most the best football team of the three of us. But we do wish Mike well on his well-deserved vacation, and that's great. So thank you again for giving us the opportunity to be here today. My name is John Meehan. Hopefully most of you know who I am. I do work with my colleague, Steve Pansky, who is also on the webinar here, and Mike O'Shea, myself, Steve Pansky, and a host of others work to help public safety do a lot of their work and to help enable you to do the great things that you do for our communities. And we really appreciate that. In fact, my parents, my 90-year-old parents and my sister are in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and they've just relocated to a hotel, so they're also affected by it. So this is a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts. So we wanted to talk to you today. It really is a follow-up to some information that we passed out a few weeks ago about a new Part 107 combination waiver that is available to public safety organizations, and hopefully it is a great enabler for you. And as Charles mentioned, or as he hinted, that these recent weather events, history is repeating itself in many ways, right? And so I wanted to take the opportunity. I've got a little slideshow presentation to kind of show you a couple things and talk about some things, and then and of course we can throw open the door to answer any of your questions that way. I don't think we may have Kerry Fleming from the SOSC join us, but I think he's a little busy right now. So so if he can't make it, hopefully you all understand that he's a busy fellow right now. So without further ado, let me go into a little presentation that I've made to help kind of engage in a discussion. Bear with me here for a second while I get this set up properly. All right. So, it's very interesting. We had the Sanibel Island situation a couple of years ago. We've got the Hurricane Helene, and I'm watching these YouTube videos probably just like you are. And some of them are, frankly, cringeworthy, right? Some of them make me very nervous. Some of them are wonderful. And one of the things that just keeps coming back to me ever since Hurricane Harvey, and Steve will remember very well, Steve and I first started working together back when Hurricane Harvey hit the Houston area. And ever since then, it seems you see these images and news about, the Cajun Navy, the Cajun Air Force, all this stuff. It's great. It's great stuff, right? And it's pretty clear to me that a lot of these local entities they get overwhelmed pretty quickly, and they need additional resources, and there are some resources out there. And so I just want to plant the seed with those of you who are obviously not, if you're on this webinar today, you're probably not involved in the emergency right now, but hopefully I just want to plant the seed like, hey, think about leveraging your team or your resources. If you have a wide area event, I think the state of Virginia has a handful, less than a dozen drone pilots on their own payroll. They're certainly going to need more assets and need to coordinate that. And I did a brief stint in the Civil Air Patrol years ago, and that's where I learned about the incident command system and the air ops and things like that. So I just want to plant the seed with you all that, hey, while there's no craziness going on and you've got time, maybe you want to sit down with your chief or your team and think about credentialing or identifying some Part 107 folks who have their act together and maybe fit your culture and are knowledgeable and committed to learning. And maybe it's also a public relations opportunity to go out there and get the word out that, hey, we'd like to get a list of people. And when I say we, I mean you, not the FAA, but maybe, plant that seed to consider developing some sort of list or a process where you can get these volunteers under a little bit of control and give them some structure and to be able to coordinate them in one of these events. And I'm looking at the situation in Asheville and Chimney Rock, and you can see a lot of great people trying to do a lot of great things, but if those departments had a list of people that they could have made a quick message to, it might help them a little bit more. So just think about that.
Let me add to that too. One, we have done some stuff in Florida. So many people are reaching to drone responders saying, hey, we want to help. How do we help? We don't typically set up operational things. So we typically allow you to go through the emergency management office. They're the ones who are typically doing the assignments and coordination. That way it is actually coordinated in some form or fashion. One of the things I will say up front is do not self-deploy. These are very austere conditions. They do not have power. They do not have connectivity. And they don't need someone else to show up that they're not planning for to have to take care of because they're already overwhelmed. But one of the things we've done in Florida, we created the Florida Coordinating Group. And so we do have pulled a collective together of knowing who all has drones in what areas, and it's now started coordinating through Florida emergency management as well. So there's a way to do some of the stuff, but do it in advance.
And the time to do it is, not when your hair's on fire, right? I mean, the time to do it is when things are nice and calm. And so anyway, just something to think about, right? Hopefully some of these units, thank you very much for that added comment there. So something to think about. All right. I want to talk about ADS-B, automated data broadcasting system, right? So automated data surveillance broadcast. Sorry, I always forget that. And I've read also lots of comments about helicopters and ag people not having ADS-B and what the heck's going on, and in some of these waivers, and in fact, this public safety organization shielded ops waiver that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, we're going to require you to have some form of ADS-B receiver that's going to give you current up-to-date information about the air traffic in your vicinity. And we wanted to let you know that there's some iPhone products, there's some internet products. Those are probably not suitable for that because there's too much, we call it latency, too much time between when the signal is emitted and when it appears on your internet. So do your homework when you're looking to acquire some of these. I've seen some very good articles in some flying magazines that talk about that. There's some great systems that do meet that requirement. So word to the wise, check it out. And I want to really to make sure you understand that, hey, even though it may conform to the performance standard, there is sometimes some latency in the transmission. So the message here is, hey, even though you see the target, and you think, okay, it's over here, it might have already gone past there a little bit. So just a word to the wise, right? Even if you have the ADS-B in receiver, it's still important to keep looking around for those other aircraft because they're not always exactly where you think it might be. And then the other thing, and particularly with what's going on right now in Appalachia and down in Florida, we've had some discussions. Hey, just because they pop up a TFR doesn't mean it's immediately called controlled airspace. It's special use airspace. It's restricted airspace. but it doesn't automatically mean that there's air traffic control controlling it. So don't get lulled into a sense of an incorrect sense of security, like, oh yeah, we're good to go because there's a TFR, and it doesn't always mean it's controlled. So that's another reason why to get some other eyes up there watching the airspace around there it's all about situational awareness. Okay. Now, I have heard, particularly like last time with Sanibel Island, I heard some, I got an earful from a lot of public safety folks when I was at a conference a couple years ago. And I think it's important to also help you understand, if the manned aircraft is equipped with ADS-B, they're supposed to use it. It is required to be turned on, and that's the regulation there. 91.225 and subparagraph F, and essentially says that if it's installed, you have to have it on unless otherwise authorized by air traffic control. Air traffic control might agree to letting an entity operate without ADS-B out, particularly when it's a national security mission, or it might be for a law enforcement situation. There are some limited situations where they might not have it. Military aircraft might not have it either. So, so ADS-B is great for situational awareness. It's not a panacea. Now, and I'm thinking about this, I'm watching some of these videos regarding the Asheville situation. And, if you do encounter, if you're out there operating on a public safety mission and somebody goes blowing through, at low level, and they have their ADS-B turned off, and I know there's a culture of, don't rat out your buddy. Well, in this case, you need to, because there is a little bit of an old culture, to keep that off. And, but the world has changed since drones have come out, right? So in the old days, it was probably a little easier to justify, even though it was incorrect or a violation. But these days, if you're talking to your manned pilot colleagues, and tell them to get it on because it's in their own self-interest, right? Self-preservation. But if you do encounter, and I know many of you probably already have encountered this, please do report this to the FSDO. If they come blowing through without transmitting ADS-B out, they are required to do it. If there's an investigation, the FSDO does have a lot of latitude. They don't immediately have to go to find this person. They can do counseling, and the fact that the FAA calls might already change the behavior. Okay, so don't feel like, oh, I'm ratting out this guy. It's for their own good. It's for everyone's safety. If they're operating without it, they're probably in violation of the regulation. And then when you do decide, if you decide to report it, we do need really, and it's really important to get those facts. What's the day, the time, the tail number, because if they're flying low enough for you to see the tail number, that's probably an indicator. And then also let the FSDO know that, hey, they were operating without ADS-B out, and that gives the FSDO something to go by. And again, you can see this FAA order here. I've got 2150.3C. This is what's called our enforcement program or compliance program. This doesn't mean that everything immediately goes to fines, no, but there is a wide flexibility in there. In fact, in there also is if people interfere with your operations, it tells the FAA what to do about that. So take a look at that when you have time. And you can look up FAA orders, just Google it, or your favorite search engine, FAA orders, and then you'll see that link. All right. Now, speaking of collision avoidance, right? The other component of this is I am really advocating a great deal about equipping drones with an anti-collision light, particularly if you're doing public safety work. And again, I'm going to come back to, many people still aren't fully aware, but there's been 12 collisions between manned aircraft and drones since 2017 that we've confirmed it definitely happened, or we deem it highly probable that it happened based on the evidence. And in 100% of those cases where we talked to the manned pilots, and it were both helicopters and general aviation aircraft uh, at varying altitudes. And in 100% of the cases, the manned pilot said, I never saw it, or I thought it was a bird until the last second, or I saw it too late. And if you put an anti-collision light on it, as I tell Charles, all the time, if you put an anti-collision light on it, me as the helicopter pilot, that ain't a bird, right? And it's flashing a light. And if it's flashing a light and I'm flying my helicopter, what I know is that, hey, if it's flashing a light and I hit it, it's going to kill me, right? So I need to do something. So psychologically, you're going to help that manned pilot recognize that this is something that they need to do something about. And yes, the man pilot has the right of way. Yes, the drone pilot is supposed to get out of the way, but the reality is, and I'm sure many of you already have experienced this, right? That uh, many times they're flying at an altitude or direction that is completely unexpected, and it takes 12 and a half seconds on average to react to uh, another aircraft, and that's basically a half a mile to three-quarters of a mile with a low-flying Black Hawk. And if you don't see down to the horizon, give everyone a better chance by putting that anti-collision light on. And here's, the most drones come with position lights. Some come now with an anti-collision light, but there is a difference between the two. And so this is just an example I found on Drone Blog of a couple there. But take a look at that, and please only use white or red, because the other colors don't register with a manned pilot. They have different meanings. Like, for example, green is on airport runway center lines, and blue is around taxiways, and yellow is along the other lights there. So red and white, in my opinion, would be the most appropriate, and it has to flash. So give everybody an extra chance there to avoid that, right? Because that's what we want to avoid. All right, let's shift gears now to the public safety organization shielded ops waiver. Hopefully you're aware of this. Drone Responders does have one of these, has a copy of a guide and a checklist that we want you to fill out if you want this waiver. This is a combination. This is a Part 107. And I'm going to say it's a tactical beyond visual line of sight like waiver. It gives you a waiver to 107.31, which is visual line of sight operation. It gives you a waiver to 107.39, which is operations over people. And it gives you a waiver to 107.145, which is operations over moving vehicles with people inside. And we started to get some in, and my waiver colleagues are telling me that most of them are sailing through, but there's still a few that have some issues. And I said, okay, well, tell me what those issues are. And the first one is that, and it's an interesting one. Many of you are familiar with the public declaration letter that you submit to get access to the COA online processing system. And that is not the same thing, because the public declaration letter is essentially saying to the FAA, we're a qualified public aircraft per the statute 49 USC 40102A41. But those are for public aircraft operations, which are done under Part 91 with that COA. So if you submit this, you're essentially telling us you don't know the difference between Part 91 and Part 107. And remember, this public safety organization shielded ops is a Part 107 waiver. So right out of the gate, you're not helping get that done, right? So they're going to come back to you and say, hey, this isn't what we need. They need a letter on the organization's letterhead saying, hey, we are a public safety organization as defined in Public Law 118-63, Section 926E, and you can look it up. It's pretty broad, but we want you to, because this is not for everybody, this is for public safety organizations to help them do their missions. And then the other thing is if you look at 107.200, that's the policy for issuing a waiver. That requires a brief description. If you just give us some typical examples of, hey, we're a search and rescue organization, and we occasionally need to go beyond visual line of sight or operate over people in the conduct of operations. Nothing, you're not having to write a novel here, but we do require, you have to have something in there to give us the ability to proceed with the waiver. And then we've created a guide to get you through the FAA drone zone. That's where you're going to apply for this waiver, is FAA drone zone.faa.gov. And we realized that getting through FAA drone zone can be challenging, right? So we tried to make this simple. We gave you a guide that says, when you get to this point, do this, do this, do this. And then there's a checklist that the responsible person of the organization has to initial all the items and then sign it and include that in the attachments to send to us.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I've put the link in for both the guide and the
Great.
presentation of today.
Okay, great. Yeah. And if we have time, we can zip through it also later. And I'm almost done with this part of it. Some of the other issues that we're seeing is this responsible person hasn't signed it, and the responsible person needs to sign it. You need to be on the hook for this. This is it's a serious thing, and but by initialing and signing it, you're going to read through it hopefully and understand what you're committing to. The other thing that tends to kick it back is and what we've done with this is we've basically said, look, we know that public safety needs waivers for certain things. We're comfortable with people doing it this way. And if you agree to doing it this way, here's your waiver. If you want to do it in a different way, that's fine. We can entertain that, but that bounces you back into the usual process. And that could delay what you want to do. And to give you an example, the usual process, if you were going to apply for a waiver to 10731, you'd have to answer 40 questions related to the 10731 waiver safety explanation guidelines. And if you want to do that, have at it. Good luck with that too. So this is kind of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to say, look, we think we're comfortable with you operating this way, doing these things, and the special provisions. I think there's about 20 special provisions that you have to comply with, that you're telling the FAA you're going to comply with. And then, okay, go do it. And we think that'll work for them. Okay, last one. So and then the obvious question is, okay, Don, this sounds great, but where can I find it? So as Charles mentioned, the Drone Responders has it in their online resource center. I think he put the link there. And then we have people called FAA Drone Pros. They are sprinkled throughout the country, and inside the FAA Drone Pro Toolkit, it's a restricted access area that only FAA Drone Pros can get to. And that's how you find a Drone Pro in the FAST Team directory there. And they can also get you a copy of that. And then you can also reach out to our UAS support center at uashelp.gov, FAA.gov rather. And I think that's it on the slides. So, yeah. So,
John, one of the things you mentioned, the tactical waiver, and for those who may not know what it is, can you tell a little bit about the difference between the two?
I think probably Steve would be better to describe what the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver is. I'll start it off basically, but it is essentially it's a part 91 certificate of authorization / waiver, and as a waiver to or alternate means of compliance with 91.113b. And I know that the general differences are that, and I'll talk about public safety shielded one, Steve, and then you can talk about the tactical if you don't mind.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay, so in the public safety one, for example, you can operate 1 statute mile away from the remote pilot, and you can go to 200 feet above the obstructions, within 200 feet of that obstruction. You don't need a visual observer. You do need to equip with ADS-B in. You do need to have an anti-collision light on. You do need to have some form of protection of the rotors from lacerating human skin. That's the number one ground injury from a drone, is from that. And I don't know why any public safety wouldn't start doing that anyway. And then depending on the weight of the drone, if it weighs more than 0.88 pounds, we're going to require you to put a parachute recovery system on it. And it has to conform to the ASTM F3322-18 or newer standard. And then, the other thing to keep in mind while I'm talking about a parachute recovery system, remember also that under Part 107, there are essentially 4 categories of operations over people, right? And if you want to operate without a waiver to 107.39, you need to use a category compliant drone. And there are some now. There, up until very recently, there were none. But in the last few months, I think there's 4 or 5 now, category 2, that they're parachute recovery systems, very good systems. And that was done by, the work was done by Parachute Recovery, AVSS, I believe. It was done by them. And they did a great job on it. So something to think about. So that's the essence of a public safety shielded one. It relies on infrastructure shielding, ADS-B, and anti-collision lights as the mitigations for the anti-collision. So I'm going to hand it to Steve, who can talk a little bit more about the tactical beyond visual line of sight and others.
Sure. So we talk about, there's 2 programs we offer up, which are the tactical beyond visual line of sight and the first responder beyond visual line of sight. These are only available to public safety agencies that, as John had mentioned earlier, qualify as political subdivisions of their state, as defined in Title 49 USC 40102A41C or D if you're leasing aircraft. You are required to hold a COA, as a public operator already before you are able to apply for these. And when I say hold a COA, it's a Part 91 COA as opposed to a COA that you might receive under Part 107 for operations that you may receive as a civil Part 107 operator. The 2 programs are really, one's designed where you're actually at the scene of the operational area where you need to go beyond visual line of sight for a short period of time to conduct operations. Examples of this might be a collapsed building where you need to get in there and see operation there, and you can't really see where the aircraft is located at or maintain eyes on it, or a tanker truck has gone over and exploded or is exploding fumes, and you want to put the aircraft behind the backside of that to observe what the labeling is on the tanker truck, to find the chemical agents that's releasing, or in a lot of cases where you need to go behind the fence line or behind the backside of a building to be able to observe what's there, and you don't want to put anybody obviously in harm's way while you're doing that, or want to go over that fence to see that large pit bull over there and let the aircraft do that as opposed to the human going over the fence. Those types of operations are what we call tactical, where you remain within 50 feet of the object that you're going to be observing and go beyond visual line of sight. You're not exceeding 400 feet. Your UAS that's operating has to be within 1,500 feet of the GCS, the ground control station, the controller that you're operating it from. And you return to visual line of sight as soon as practical after you do that. That's the tactical. The other one out there, which we just, and oh, by the way, right now we've had about 650 tactical beyond visual line of sights that we've written on for public safety. Several of those are renewal of requests, but for the most part, a huge amount of public agencies are operating with the tactical as a valuable component. And the new one we just started last year and just starting to get a lot of mobility and a lot of movement forward, is the first responder beyond visual line of sight. This one is where you can launch the aircraft from a location and it can actually be in front of your responding resources. And the requirement is that so long as you can see 2 miles around where the aircraft is operating, you no longer have to see the aircraft. You're in essence are protecting for where the aircraft is operating from the launch to the operational location to the recovery of the aircraft. And so long as you can see 2 miles around it so that you can identify and deconflict with aircraft that might be intruding within that airspace, you can run the operation and have beyond visual line of sight. This seems to be working really well. where you're launching the aircraft from several locations, possibly around your city, to a location. And so long as you're able to see the operating area that the aircraft is at and protecting for it, you could send the aircraft out there in front of it, is what you can do. And again, for these types of operations where you can put the aircraft on the scene before you have resources arrive at the scene, it could be invaluable, obviously, for identifying, is the event still ongoing to where I have to respond resources? Is the event at a stage where I need to respond additional resources to that location? But it gives you that valuable information. Those two types of programs, again, are all for public agencies that are operating under Part 91. So you do have to operate under COA as a public aircraft operator, where John's program, which is just starting off here and developing, is for the Part 107 operators. These are civil operators who don't qualify as a public aircraft operator, or for those public agencies that want to only operate under 107, but they want this additional capability of being able to respond under the shielded program, be able to do that. This is giving them that access that they normally could not get because they're not really capable of operating as a public operator because they don't qualify, or they just basically don't want to go through the public process of going ahead and doing that. And so those are the programs that those are running under. John?
Yeah, that was a great explanation as usual. And, I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and I think that one of the common themes I see is, hey, does my entity meet the definition? And I'm going to be a little cagey and say, you need to tell us that you do. We're not going to play Solomon here. But so take a look at that definition, and I will tell you that it's a pretty loose definition. And the net that Congress cast seems to be pretty wide. And if you look at that definition and you have a conversation internally, say, well, do we meet that? And I saw one about a nonprofit, a lot of search and rescue organizations are 501(c)(3)s, but they exist. You're one of the groups we wrote this for, because these entities couldn't meet the definition of a public aircraft, yet they have a legitimate public interest need to do these sorts of operations, right? So but you have to look at that definition, and it's basically, what's your primary activity? I think that's an important thing, is if your primary activity is the safety of the public, and I don't remember the definition. It's not a long definition.
No.
And
the other thing I would add, John, is that as a public operator, the way you qualify there is by having an attorney who's representing your agency. It could be the city attorney or the county attorney, who has to prepare that letter that's sent to the FAA to basically qualify you to operate as a public aircraft operator. The letter John's referring to is one that's really just written by your own agency, your own police department, your own fire department, your own community emergency response team. It's really only that agency that really has to put it together to provide.
Yeah, and we want you to put it on your entity's letterhead, so that, because it's not going to be John Meehan's aerial survey company, because John Meehan's aerial survey company is not primarily engaged in the public safety, right? But if you're the Boulder, Colorado search and rescue, you probably do meet that, right? So you have to. I know some of you are going to be frustrated by this answer, but take a look at that definition. And I think if you're on this webinar, I'd say there's a pretty good chance you may conclude that, yes, you do meet that definition. And is a mall security policeman, does he meet that definition? I don't know. If you're a nonprofit that does search and rescue, you probably do, if that's your primary activity. If you're the Kiwanis Club, probably not, right? Because that's not your primary mission. If you're a community-based organization, Probably not, right? But if you're an entity that's set up for the safety of the public and doing those kinds of missions, then I would say you probably do. So, but you have to look at it, you have to determine it, and what we're trying to do is say, look, you need to tell us that you do. And if there's glaring questions, that hey, we're the Army football team, that's not going to, we're probably going to say, yeah, it's probably not for you, right? But hopefully that helps clarify it a little bit. And what other questions that
I wanted to add that for like Civil Air Patrol, I think that because they do search and rescue, I think it's safe to say that. Plus, they also take FEMA missions for disasters and disaster assessment. So I think that's an easy one to say yes from my
yeah.
perspective. John's not
Yeah, I
going to
mean,
tell you yes or no,
I
but
was
I'm
in
going to
the
tell you yes because I can,
yeah.
and John can't.
Well, I was in the cap, right? And I think for some of the missions that they do, probably not all, right? I mean, it depends, right? You have to really go back and look, and because Congress, if you look at where that is, it's in that public safety tethered thing, right? And Congress pretty much told us, look, we want you to kind of open that up a little bit and check it out.
Yeah, I want to put this other thing in here in the if I can get it to go. The link to our blog, which um, has some of the tips and things that you learned along the way of things that people need to be doing to make sure that they get it corrected. So that link in the chat right now actually goes through and does that. And your next question is: so this new waiver is Part 107, but only for public safety and not for nonprofit. That's the question.
Well, a nonprofit could be engaged primarily in public safety, right? Like a search and rescue organization, I think you could
Yep.
argue that it does.
Yep.
The Rotary Club, probably not, right? So, and it's a loose definition. Y'all can figure it out, I think. You have to look at it, right? And I see a question from Gino. Hey, yeah, nationwide Class G, and you want to. And so this is an important thing too. Some of you operate in, let's say, for example, this one I know. Let's say, for example, you're in Danbury, Connecticut, and the only place you're around is in Class D airspace. Well, that's a little bit of a challenge for this because these Part 107 waivers, and in fact, if you operate as a public aircraft and you get your blanket COA, those are good in Class G. And the Lance system is currently not set up to do Lance approvals for waivered operations. So how do you do this? Well, what you would do is you would go through FAA Drone Zone and do the operational waiver first for this combination waiver. You get that done. That gets you nationwide Class G. And then if you need to be in Danbury's airspace, then you go back in and you into FAA Drone Zone, and you'll see this radio button. There's two radio buttons. One says airspace authorization and the other says operational waiver. The public safety organization's shielded ops, it's an operational waiver to 10731, right? The airspace authorization is how you're going to get a wide area authorization from in FAA Drone Zone, and you're going to get it's going to be on a COA form also, the COW/A, and it'll be for a period of time. And then you're going to apply for that. And more than likely, and I would attach this public safety shielded ops waiver to it, say, I want to operate here. And my recommendation would be stay at the UAS facility map grid heights or lower. And I think you've got a very good chance of getting a wide area authorization to do that, which is what you would have to do with what we used to call the jurisdictional COA to operate as a public aircraft. You'd have to do essentially the same thing. I hope that kind of clarifies that.
Yeah, and it's also for those agencies that are Part 107 and don't have an interest in going to public aircraft operations. They just want to be able to do this, which you have to have the public aircraft operation COA in order to do the tactical beyond regional site waiver. You don't with this. And
Yeah.
again, the agencies that didn't meet that public aircraft operation are the volunteer fire departments, the nonprofits that do search and rescue, and all those kind of organizations
Yeah, I
that
think
got
the
this done.
80%, right? So I'm hoping that this public safety organization Shielded Ops one will actually get the 80% who were, on the outside looking in for the last few years. One other thing I wanted to cover, when you get your waiver, you're going to see one of the special provisions is going to require uh, your organization to notify some other entities that you have this. And the intent here is to notify the local manned units who may have want to talk to you about this. So you're going to see in there a special provision that says, hey, you got to notify the FSDO, you got to notify the military reps, and we tell you how to find the military rep. And the military reps, let's say, for example, you're in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we want you to send this also to the central, that would be the Central Service Center. And it says it in there how to do that. That's this, and then you say attention mill reps, and that'll get to them, and they'll look at this and say, hey, you know what? We need to tell Naval Air Station Corpus about this, and maybe Naval Air Station Corpus will want to call you up and say, hey, let's talk about this. Maybe, and you all work it out. And then the other thing is we're going to require you to notify local law enforcement helicopter units or medevac HEMS people. And the idea is to make them aware that, hey, we're blowing around here at 200 feet above the building. Maybe you want to raise your altitude a little bit, right? And maybe you want to get John Meehan to quit flying treetop levels, hitting the tops of the trees with his OH-58 skid. Maybe you want to tell him to get up to 500 feet now. And that's the idea. And then the idea, and we also know that, hey, you do mutual support outside your local areas. And the intent of that clause is not that you have to go, let's say, for example, you're a unit in Fairfax County, Virginia, and you've just deployed to Asheville, right, which they've done. The idea is, no, you wouldn't have to go find every HEMS operator in the area there. It's only for the local folks in your area where you're based and where you're going to be using this most of the time. That's the intent there.
I would also add, John, that you wanted not just limited to your list there. We have a lot of media out there that are flying helicopters.
Yep.
In your local communities, especially the larger communities, and
Yep.
It would behoove you to have that discussion with them also, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be responding to locations where you will probably
and they have the most skin in the
go.
game, right? They have the most skin in the game, and what we're trying to do is get you all talking to each other, and you can work it out. We had a great conversation with the Arlington, Texas Police Department a couple weeks ago, and it was, who they are, right? You know who the local HEMS people are in your area, and if you don't, you ought to. And one of the other things you'll see in this waiver, we're trying to give people some structure in how to do some planning, because we recognize that a lot of folks flying drones now are new aviators. They're not, of course, we have people who are very experienced and really know what they're doing, but there's also a lot who really don't understand about air risk and don't understand that, hey, there's a hospital a half a mile away from where we're going to operate. And in that special provision, we're going to say, hey, if you got to do a pre-mission planning, it can be hasty, right? Even when I was on alert in Korea, every time we took off, we still did a little bit of a plan. So don't tell me you can never plan. I'm not buying it. You can do a hasty plan, right? But the idea is hey, within a mile of where you're flying, you need to look for places where manned aircraft are likely going to be, such as hospital helipads, maybe some long fields perfectly suited for ag aircraft, right? We want the crews to go, there might be some ag aircraft out here, so let's keep an eye out for that. Maybe we want to contact the ag operators who are known to fly there and let them know that, hey, we're going to be at 200 feet, so that's the idea. That's the idea. Just to get, because again, right, knowledge and clarity enhances safety. And you put that anti-collision light on there and they know about it, you guys can figure something out. Maybe they say, give us a call before you go. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing too, as you mentioned, is as you're talking to these aviation units, is tell them, make sure you get your ADSB on. So,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
we're going to tell on you if you don't. No, just kidding.
Well, no, but you should tell on them because listen, I was an Army pilot. We never did that stuff, and it's in unless they're suicidal, And again, right, they're thinking, oh, the drone guys should be able to see me in time to get out of my way. They don't understand that. Oh no, what we've figured out, right, is that most of these collisions happen when the drone pilot, he's doing this, he's not looking up in the sky, right?
Yeah, and to your point, it's also important, especially if you're operating nearby a National Guard aviation unit, is have communications with them as well because they may be involved in the search and rescue situation, and they need to know, remind them because they don't always military turn on their ADSB either because they're trying to be not seen by anybody. But you need to tell them when you're doing this, please do that. But one of the questions that came up is, can't the FAA do something more proactive? And I think we're hoping that Part 108 is going to address a lot of this and change the mindset and the rules. This rule can change the mindset of what the requirements are. Not that everybody will adhere to the requirements, but it will start putting some liabilities in different places, which usually has an impact.
Yeah, this is a constant struggle, right? And I feel your pain, Jakey. I don't have a good answer for you. We try to do outreach with our FAST team. That's a big part of their mission is to do outreach with the community. There's over 19,000 airports out there in the United States, 19,000, right? So, and most of them are Class G, where nobody really has to talk to them anyway, right? So you just have to remain well clear. And of course, you want to be a good neighbor, and particularly in public safety, you want to have a conversation with them because maybe one day one of their hangars is going to catch fire, right? So, I mean, you have a good excuse, I think, to go talk to them about general stuff in general. But in the YouTube videos, I mean, that I'm watching right now, right, it's pretty obvious that the whole concept of centralized incident command is still not well known out there, right? And I can tell that not a lot of local agencies understand how to do that. And I get it, right? It takes time and it's just a constant struggle. And we do have outreach going on with them. And we are talking to them. We have an airports group. But I'm not gonna, I have to put my hand over my heart and say, look, I don't have a magic wand, I don't, and in fact, they're always telling me, where's the force field, John? We want a force field to stop those drones, those darn drones. We want a force field. It's like, it's not happening, right? So we have to work together, the drones and manned aircraft and the airports and all that. We all have to work together to do it safely, right? Because that's what we're all about.
Yeah, also a reminder in these situations and emergencies, you still have the opportunity to contact the SOSC for an emergency SGI special government interest waiver, which will allow you to fly in some cases beyond visual line of sight or even above the facility map grids. They coordinate all that. So that's another option.
Yeah, and I want to address Rakesh, great comments about Army helicopters. And, I'm a former Army helicopter guy and air cav and I can tell you, I got nervous when I ever got above 500 feet. Oh my gosh, because if I had a chip light, I want to be on the ground, But so Rakesh, one of the things, one of my objectives, I guess, or one of my hopes is that when you get these waivers, you're going to send it to the mill reps, and the mill reps are going to send it to these units, and these units, ops officers are going to go, what is this? Right? And they're going to, hopefully they'll go, we better call these guys and find out what the heck's going on. And so, my one of my hidden objectives is to get you all talking to each other, because once these units realize that the world has changed, like it or not, right? The world has changed. And the days of me flying my OH-58 at treetop level down in lower Alabama, upper corner of lower Alabama, UCLA is what we used to call it, right? They're pretty much coming to an end, right? I mean, unless I'm in a sterilized area. And yes, the drone pilot has to give way. Yes, it's their fault if we hit, but you know what? If we hit, I'm dead. That's not good for me, right? So that's why, and for you all, please, I can put that anti-collision light on. They don't weigh a lot. You can buy them online. Uh, and I'm telling you, if a helicopter pilot sees a flashing light, I know it's not a bird. And I kind of joke about the bird, right? Because as a helicopter pilot, I am trained to know that if I'm flying towards a bird, he's more than likely going to dive at the last second. So a lot of them, and remember, a Mavic Mini is the size of a Blue Jay, right? If I can see it at all against the background, you got a dark thing against a dark background, I'm probably not going to see it. But if I do see it, I'm going to say, well, is that a blue jay? What is that, a bird, right? Or a turkey buzzard? And then you want, if it's flashing a light, that ain't a turkey buzzard, right? I need to do something. And so that again, right, it increases that time to make a decision, get out of the way. No collision is a good thing, right? So that's the idea there. So.
All right, let me change gears for a second. Let me talk a little bit about drone as a first responder waivers without visual observers, and just give you all an update that we have been having conversations with the FAA, and we are looking for some changes to come forward. So those of you that have DFR waivers without visual observers in place of using technology, we're hoping to see some of those things change, some expedited approval of waivers, and some changes in that regard. So stay tuned. We're hoping to have a meeting next week that'll open that up a little bit more with the FAA. And once we do, we will share that with everybody. So it's kind of exciting, as we all know that human visual observers are not very reliable. They might be nice people, but they just can't see the distance and what's out there. So I don't have much more to report to you tonight, but more to come hopefully the next week, and we'll put the information out.
Yeah, and then do we have time for a couple more?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Got a question about, hey, is so-and-so exempt from ADS-B? So take a look at 91.225, and you'll see that there are some exceptions to ADS-B. It's a very long reg, but and particularly look at 91.225F, because it'll talk about when they can request an authorization to turn it off, and it's for national security, law enforcement. There's a lot of reasons why they might call, and some of them can get an authorization from the FAA to keep it off all the time. So it is possible. There is an order, I think it's 7400.11, I think it's something like that, but there is an FAA order that talks, oh no, that's the airspace. There's so many orders out there, but yeah, there are many of those that can get that, and military typically often doesn't use it. And again, right, so let's say in the Sanibel Island one comes to mind, right? Because I got an earful about these doggone Coast Guard people and the Army Chinooks blowing through at 200 feet, and they didn't have it on. So yeah, that's why you can't be, target locked on your screen. You still have to have the head on the swivel there, because it's not 100%. Let's see what else we got here. Anything else? Don't know about Boeing ForeFlight. Don't know anything about that. What else? Anything else I'm missing here?
I don't think there's anything else. I think you covered most of it as we went through.
Yeah, so Ron asked about an observer. I always 100% recommend that you operate with at least one. I ask people when I see them, I say, hey, are you a drone pilot or are you a camera operator? And they're like, well, I'm a drone pilot. I say, well, how come you're not flying the drone in compliance with 107.31, which is, and I mean, if we have a minute, 107.31, right? It's not visual line of sight. It defines what a compliant visual line of sight operation is, which is not the same as, oh, I can see it. It's not the same thing. You take a look at that, and it describes what a compliant visual line of sight operation is. And I use the acronym LADON, location, altitude, attitude, direction of flight, observe the area for other aircraft, and not be a hazard to people on the ground or in the air. That's very different from, oh yeah, I can see my drone. That's not, seeing your drone doesn't meet the criteria of 107.31. So, and the other question is, well, I can see my drone's flashing light. That anti-collision light is not for you to help you with your visual acuity. That anti-collision light is for the other manned aircraft to see and avoid you. So, and here's another question I get, like, hey, we're law enforcement, we're chasing bad guys. Can we get lights out? And the answer is no, because but put the anti-collision light on the top of the drone. The bad guys are down below, they might not see it, but the manned aircraft will see it. Okay. What else?
Somebody raised their hand, and I don't see it on here who raised their hand.
Yeah, if you can put your question in the chat, John, that'd probably be best. I don't think we can let you talk.
Well, I can let him talk if I know who it was
okay.
that raised their hand. And one of the questions now is, so you always recommend anti-collision light all the time? Yes.
I do, because I can tell you from personal experience, and there's been lots of studies out there, and I've seen some video from a Department of Energy helicopter that was doing a power line inspection, and they had a near midair in Goodyear, Arizona, and it's amazing. You cannot see that drone until it's 60 feet away, and it is frightening. And by the way, in Chile in 2021, a Mavic Mini went through the windscreen of a Jet Ranger and hit the left seat passenger, which is exactly where I used to sit when I was an instructor pilot in OH-58s. Hit him right in the face, and they never saw it. And again, right, your drone is the size of a Blue Jay. Think about this, right? Take your drone, put it to the backyard, lights out in the shadows, more than 60 feet away. Look away for a while. Have your somebody in your house say, "Hey, where's my drone?" and watch them. They won't see it. But if it has a flashing light, guess what? They'll see it. Yeah. So I'm on a little campaign to encourage everyone, put that on, and also put on prop guards, because the #1 injury from a drone, according to the National Emergency Injury Surveillance Scale, is a laceration. And some poor kid in Florida got the tip of his finger cut off by one of those larger drones, like a Matrice. It started flying away. He went to grab it, and it cut his finger off. And and imagine if that was a public safety Matrice that did that to a kid in the stroller. Not good. Put some prop guards on there and reduce that chance, To Ron in Netherlands. Hoe is het met jou? Spreek ik een klein beetje Nederlands? I used to live in Amsterdam, so my kids were born there. That's awesome, right? Hoop Holland.
So there is a quick question here. It says, just a quick comment, new drone program, law enforcement, talking with SOSC as a new guy. There are very limited scenarios that are considered emergency, for which we, however, as LEOs, see as emergency. Armed and dangerous manhunt and or high risk warrants should be considered emergency, in my opinion. And
yeah. So if there's an armed, if there's a shooter, we just had a situation, I think it was up in Alaska, where a police officer launched and didn't bother calling. And they told him later, hey, we had an active shooter, so we went. They were off the approach end of Anchorage, Alaska, and they launched the drone without telling anybody, right? Not good, right? Take a minute, call dispatch, have dispatch call the SOSC, say, we have an active shooter here. Do you think for a second the FAA wants airplanes and helicopters flying around where there's somebody with a gun to shoot at them? No, we want to, right? So if you have those situations, that's definitely one where you want to call the SOSC and they'll call approach control and tell them to vector people out of the way. And so, yeah.
I think most of those situations that you're talking about of a very dangerous warrant situation, a man with a gun in the hunt, I think you're going to have SOSC approve your
yeah, the warrant one is an interesting one, right? Because that's a planned operation. Every time I have a conversation with the law enforcement folks, they're saying, look, that's if you're doing lights out and if you're going in knocking down doors, that's not done on a ad hoc basis, right? So that's a planned operation. And I would argue that a drone one of the great things about drones is they have standoff, right? They've got wonderful cameras. You don't need to be right on top of there to get the situational awareness. So, you could still have an anti-collision light on the top of that drone and the bad guys aren't going to see it, and you're going to keep it far enough away where they'll think it's a street light or a star, right? I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people will call up the SOSC or write emails to the SOSC about drones following them around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and blasting lasers into their heads. They'll think, but again, right, that anti-collision light is going to do more for collision avoidance, I think, than anything, in my opinion.
But if you're flying outside and you're flying directly toward the building, the SOSC is going to give you that approval because that's not the same and you're not risking the airspace. And so taking a collision light off on level, if you're flying that low, that's different. And so the big thing is when you're up in the airspace where you're likely to have a helicopter or other aircraft flying, that's where this anti-collision light really
and remember what Steve brought up a point too, right? That some of these events attract news, right? And so the news helicopters are going to be there. So don't assume that you're going to have that airspace all to yourself unless the SOSC tells you.
Yep.
And they might, depending on some situations, they might sterilize that airspace. They might.
If it's an active shooter, they're more likely going to quickly stand up at TFR because they're stopping aircraft from landing and departing over that operation. I know we've gone over. They don't like holes in the bottom of aircraft. They don't like it.
I know we've gone over. I appreciate everyone hanging on, and I don't know if we've got any more questions you want us to answer, Charles.
No, I think we've covered everything. The big thing is we've got these disasters going on. Don't self-deploy. Reach out to somebody, an official agency, and thank everybody for being here and the conversations, the questions. We had a good attendance today, and we now have about 1,300 people that are registered to receive these webinars notices. This is going to be recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel at Drone Responders in about 2 days.
Well, thank you all for what you do. We appreciate it.
We do. Stay safe out there, please.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. John, Steve, as always, thank you all for being here.
Anytime. Thank you, Charles, for having us.
Next month, same place, same time.